My name is Eric Mahieu, and I'm a member of the core group of the Scottish Laity Network. Tonight, it's my privilege to welcome you to our synodal conversation, Yves Congar in Synodality, with our companion, Eric Mahieu. But before I hand over to Gemma to welcome and introduce Eric, we affirm that at the heart of all we seek to do is a desire to be led by the Holy Spirit. And so we recall the prayer of John the 23rd for the Second Vatican Council.
Renew your wonders in this our day, as by a new Pentecost.
This centrality of the Spirit has been firmly emphasized by Pope Francis as essential for authentic synodality.
I want to say again that the Synod is not a parliament or an opinion poll. The Synod is an ecclesial event, and its protagonist is the Holy Spirit. If the Spirit is not present, there will be no Synod.
Let us now pray that we will be open to the Spirit tonight, as we pray the prayer that Pope Francis prayed as he concluded his address on the opening of the Synod in October 2021.
Come, Holy Spirit. You inspire new tongues and place words of life on our lips. Keep us from becoming a museum church, beautiful but mute, with much past and little future.
Come among us so that in this synodal experience, we will not lose our enthusiasm, dilute the power of prophecy, or descend into useless and unproductive discussions.
Come, Spirit of love, open our hearts to hear your voice. Come, Holy Spirit of holiness, renew the holy and faithful people of God. Come, Creator Spirit, renew the face of the earth. Amen.
Let us now spend a few minutes in silent prayer, opening ourselves to the Spirit and praying for our broken and divided world. Please enter any intentions you have in the chat.
Spiritus,
I will now hand over to Gemma to introduce our companion for this evening.
Our companion for the evening is Eric Mahieu, a renowned scholar of Congar's work, who edited Congar's Vatican II notes for publication. Eric is also a priest of the Diocese of Lille in France, who has taught theology at the Catholic Institute of Paris for 15 years. Thank you and welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you, and I am pleased to go to Scotland tonight. And I visited Scotland twice in my life, first with my parents for holidays, and then with a group of scouts and in a camp. And the first time it was an awful weather, and the second time it was wonderful, sunny weather. So that is life. Our life is made of weather, of sun and rain. And well, there is no Brexit tonight. We join together. We try to understand each other. I hope you can understand me. And I hope to understand also your questions, your ideas. First of all, I would like to introduce Yves Congar. I think many people know the name of Yves Congar. He was one of the main theologians of the Vatican II Council, the last one, of course, and he was a precursor, like John the Baptist was a precursor of Christ. He was one of the main precursors of the Council by his books, by his research, to know better the history of the Church and to help to change and to reform the Church. He was a Dominican priest. He was born in 1904 in north of France, and his vocation was very quickly in ecclesiology, which means the studying the church, the mystery of the Church. I say the mystery because in the beginning of the 20th century, people don't speak of the nature, but the mystery of the Church, because the Church is a gift of God, and we are inside this gift. We are tonight, speaking inside the mystery. So when Congar speaks of the Church, he does not speak outside of a church like an object of study, but a living member, a living priest, and he tries just to give his own service. He said he was a doctrinal helper. He was serving the Church about its doctrine, but it was just this kind of precursor to show the way. And about the theme of tonight, of course, the theme of synodality is quite interesting for everybody at this time of the story of the Church. The Pope said synodality is the characteristic of the Church in the third millennium. I hope so. I think I could say that Yves Congar prepared this idea of synodality, and he opened the way to the synodality, which is, of course, well integrated in the Vatican Council. The Second Vatican Council offered a great way for synodality, but it is not yet realized. And even after the Council, Congar saw that there was a lot of to do, because many people lived as if the priests were, how to say, had a clientele. He said a clientele. I think you understand in English, clientele. And so the people come to help the parish priests, but not to help the Church. So they are just subordinate. And Congar is not a revolutionary priest. He does not want to destroy. He wants to change the church. He wants the church to be changed, reformed, to be more faithful to its vocation, to its mission. So first of all, I would say that for Congar, synodality is not just a question of internal life of the church, but of the mission of the church in the world. And it is obvious in his own life, because in 1935, he wrote an article about a survey, a survey in France about the reasons of unbelief. Why is there so spread unbelief in France at this time? So the question of unbelief is not new, is not a question after the council, but is already in our society in France. There are sort of separation of the groups, the Christians, the non-believers, the rationalists, and so on. And he wrote an article to say that the church has to change if she wants to welcome people and to open herself to the world of this time. And he said that the church is on the defensive attitude, and it was in 1935, the church is too defensive, too juridical, too closed on herself, and cannot welcome the richness of the creation, the richness of humanity. So the church has to change our face to appear in its true mystery, the mystery of Christ welcoming the richness. And she has to renew herself, to reform herself. So this change towards synodality and all the changes which came in this 20th century are not just for internal questions, but for renewing the church, ready to welcome the man of our time. So the missionary aspect of the missionary objective of Congar is always present in his thought. And also the ecumenical aspect is, of course, he was one of the main Catholic theologians at this time, opening the way to ecumenism. And in Scotland, ecumenism is important, I think, because in France we have most people are Catholics, but of course there is also an ecumenical work at the time of Congar beginning, and the word itself was not very well accepted in the church, in the Catholic Church at this time. But he opened the way, saying that the church must open herself to everybody, and also seek the reunion, seek the unity with other churches, because the treasury of the gospel, the tradition is, of course, inside the church, the Catholic Church, but she can gain in this meeting of other churches, and she can renew in the meeting of other Christians. And this idea was not welcome at this time, because people said, yes, the Catholic Church has everything necessary for salvation. The church has the scriptures, the tradition, the priest, the pope, the bishops. Why go outside and see the other Christians? But Congar said, yes, but some parts of this treasury are well developed in other traditions, and more developed in these traditions than in our own Roman Catholic tradition. So to search a unity is also to develop ourselves, in the gospel and in the tradition, which is developing the tradition, which means the reality of Christianity is always developing new aspects. And this encounter will develop new aspects. So he was always opening his view, his theology to other Christians, other churches. This was in 1937 that he published his book, Divided Christendom, Chrétiens désunis, and then he was a prisoner of war, a prisoner in Germany for several years, and coming back to France in 1945, he saw that there was a great ebullition, boiling atmosphere of reform in France. And why? Because there was the laity wanted to have more activity in the church. The liturgy was also reformed to adapt itself to the people. Ecumenism was also developing, a Catholic action, the catechetics for young people, and many pastoral projects were animated by lay people, not only by the priests or the hierarchy. And there was a desire of reform, of changing the forms. And Congar decided to write a new book about reform. This book is well known, Vraie et fausse réforme, True and False Reform in the Church, in 1950. And the Pope John the 23rd read this book and was surprised. Is it possible to reform the church? But yes, he decided to reform the church by opening a council. And so in this book, Congar tries to see how to succeed in a reform without any schism. Because, of course, the church, the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, was obsessed by the risk of a new schism with the Protestant experience, and the Council of Trent had answered to this question of Protestantism. But there was a need to reform, but how to reform without destroying the church? This is the same problem today, I would say, because some people want to reform. I think of Germany and other countries. They want reforms, and they want reforms to be accelerated, to be more audacious, more. And there is a sort of tension in the church. So Congar sees the tensions. Congar always said, the tensions are normal in the church. The tensions are normal, but we have to go and to find a way of living together. So we accept the tensions because we are not all on the same model, and there are sensibilities in the church, but we have to work together, to live together, and to wear together the tradition, the gospel. So he writes his book to see how to succeed in a reform. And in this book, he says that we have first to have a good idea of the church. And he said in the church, there are two aspects that we must distinguish. The first aspect is the structure, institution, the Pope, the bishops, well, the hierarchy, and what is also the dogmas, the sacraments. All this is given, and there is also the life. So he distinguishes the structure and the life. This is a distinction, a separation, which has posed many problems, because it is not so easy to cut in a person, in a priest or in a Christian, the structure in a part and the life. But it was a way for Congar to reintroduce the life of the church, because very often the theology was just regarding seeing the structure, and was discussing about structure and not about the concrete life of the Christians in the parishes, in the movements. And so by this way, he can see what can change and what cannot change. And he said the structure cannot change. The life is the way where, the place where changes can emerge in the church. So, of course, this distinction is not satisfactory, but it permits to consider some changes, some reforms in the life of the church. So it was the first step towards the council. And he said, if we want to succeed in the reform, there are 4 conditions. The first conditions is the pastoral aspect. The reformer must not be just someone who makes a system inside his own head and just a beautiful system, but not really made for the people. So he must have also the contact with the people, the need of the people to live inside. The second condition, which is near from the first, all the conditions are related. The second conditions, and this book I advise you to read because it's always actual. It's the second condition is to live in the communion of all the church, to live not separated as a group who wants to reform, but living inside the church, because nobody alone can have inside himself all the richness of the gospel, of the tradition, and it's shared inside. Because in the theology of Congar, Christianity is not it's not a doctrine, but it's a reality. We are inside the church, we live a reality. The doctrine is coming, of course, and we need some doctrines, we need some scriptures and all the decisions of the church, but we are inside the church, and as we are in the communion of all the Christians in the church, we bear together, sorry, we bear and we transmit all this richness to the others, to our successors, I would say. And the tradition is this movement of giving what I received. So this is the second condition, to live in the communion. And the third condition is to take account of the time needed for reform. It is impossible to do everything immediately. So Congar said, I am sometimes very hurried to do something, but for the reforms of the church, I must be, how to say, patient. Patience is not just waiting passively, but to know that the history is going its way, and we cannot have everything instantly. And in our time, it's sometimes difficult for people to accept that, yes, things are going, and we need this delay. And the fourth condition is also important. Congar said that the church must adapt itself. The reform must be adaptation, but not mechanical adaptation. It means not just change, because it's easy to change some things so as to get the problem resolved without going to the source, going to the old and the long tradition of the church, what he calls ressourcement. It's a French word, and he made this word in a sense because he became very famous. Ressourcement means go back and see in the fonts of the church, the scriptures, the holy scriptures, the old tradition, the first centuries, and to see what we receive from this tradition. So if we want to resolve a problem, it is not just something mechanical, we just change a small piece, but we try to go back and to understand what is happening in our own tradition. And in the Council Vatican II, he always said, we must just adapt ourselves quickly, but we have to go back to our own sources and to see what we can find inside to respond, to answer to the question of our time. We go back to the Bible, to the church history. It was his work, in fact, his big work was to go back and to know the long history of the church and the possibility to adapt, to change, and to find the spirit of the first centuries. So with this book, Congar gave us some way of reforming the church. And I could say that the Second Vatican Council is a kind of application of the book, Vraie et Fausse Réforme, because it was a true reform, and people try to reform in the communion of all, to keep the communion, and to find new answers to the questions. And I want to say a word on another very important book of Congar. The book True and False Reform was in 1950, but then he wrote a book about lay people in the church. As you are a lay network, I think it's interesting that the book was translated in English, lay people in the church, but the French title was Jalons pour une théologie du laïcat. Jalons, I saw that we can translate jalons by milestones. Milestones, I would say a draft, a first essay, try to say something about a theology of lay people, because it was a beginning, and it was always a precursor. He said that if the lay people find their place in the church, a spring could arrive. And Pope John XXIII spoke also of a spring. The council would be a spring. So I like this idea, especially in November, the place of everybody, and especially the lay people. In this book, Lay People in the Church, in fact, he made a lot of historical research, and he saw that the church, in fact, is made of two principles. The first is a hierarchy, and in the Catholic Church there is a hierarchy given by the Lord, and that everything in the church, in the long history of the church, everything is done also with a communitarian principle. He said a communitarian principle or communitarian regime. Said that if you look at every activity in the church, there is not only a decision coming from up to down, but there is always in the church a sort of of communal work, a consensus which is made between the people, the hierarchy, and the people. The lay people, of course, are concerned, but every people in the church. So he explained that, in fact, this conciliarity, he does not say synodality, but he says conciliarity, but I think it is the same idea. The conciliarity has disappeared, in fact, more or less in the church, and it was a fact that the first Council of Vatican, the Council of Trent, insisted of the hierarchy to resist to the Protestant idea of common priesthood, but this is not a Protestant idea. Common priesthood is in the Bible, in the New Testament. So, so this aspect of community life was a bit forgotten in the church. In fact, not in the life of the church, because the life is always the life, and there is always communities in the church. There are always movements, parishes, and so. But But in the idea of the church, in the conception, in the theology, the church was mainly seen as a pyramidal structure. And he said we must go from the pyramid to the synodical church. Well, it is my own expression, because he said conciliarity. Conciliarity means a dimension of the church which is essential to it. So it has been, in a sense, forgotten, mainly by the theologians, maybe by the hierarchy also. But we have to renew this conciliarity in the life and to give it a place in our vision of the church. Conciliarity is also a word he does not use very quickly in his work, because it means also that you think about conciliarism. Conciliarism was a period and an ideology, a vision of the church governed by the bishops and the councils and not by the Pope. So at the end of the Middle Age, there was a sort of a struggle between the Pope, the power of the Pope, and the power of the council. And so he does not use this word conciliarity, but he used the word of collegiality. Of course, collegiality is mainly seen by people about bishops. But in fact, in the work of Congar, in this book, Jalons pour une théologie du laïcat, in 1953, he spoke about collegiality in a broad sense. We could say that synodality, conciliarity, and collegiality are equivalent. And he said that this word of collegiality wanted to translate a Russian word, excuse me, it's November, a Russian word, because he learned a lot Russian theologians, Orthodox theologians, and he studied, he learned also Russian in the camps when he was in captivity in Germany as a prisoner of war, an officer, and he didn't want to lose his word, his time when he was in captivity. So he learned a lot about Russian theologians, and he wanted to explain this word in Russian, sobornost, which means the way in which we are collectively participating in the same reality, which is being a Christian. So it's like ecclésialité, we could say in French, ecclésialité, being inside the church, sharing something together and exchanging our gifts, but sharing the same reality. So instead of regarding the church as just a hierarchical structure with the things going up to down, receiving the sacraments, receiving the words of the priest, we are exchanging each other. Everybody has his own ministry, his own place, but we are exchanging because we are in the same reality. And so this word of collegiality was introduced in the debate by Congar, but at the Council, Vatican II, it was mainly used to speak of episcopal collegiality. And maybe this episcopal collegiality was, of course, very important and is important, but eclipsed, in fact, the conciliarity and the idea that we are all sharing the same faith and sharing the same mission. So in this book, Congar offers a way to reconsider the place of every Christian, lay Christian, but every Christian, because of his baptism. And so he prepares a way to the council. And he said that during the council, he said that, yes, conciliarity has begun again in the church. It's begun anew in the church because conciliarity had almost disappeared in the life. And now the bishops are exchanging And also this movement must spread inside the church. So when the council approached, he published a book very important also, called La Tradition et les Traditions. And in this book, he said that the tradition, the tradition of the church is transmitted not only by the clergy, the bishops, but by all the people of God. All the people of God are the subjects, the actors of this transmission, this tradition. So he prepared the document Dei Verbum, which says that this tradition is living and is transmitted by all the people in the family, in the parishes, everywhere. Of course, the priests, the bishops have a special role to discern and to sometimes to see what is good, what is to be avoided. But in the concrete light of the church, the gospel is transmitted through the example, the life, and not only by the preaching of the priest. Yes? I have a few minutes more, or?
Yes, continue, Eric, sorry.
Yes, sorry. So we can say that, in fact, in the council, Congar gave the best of himself, because I could go to the archives of the Vatican Council in Rome and also in some other places. He worked a lot, and he in fact, he worked especially for the second chapter of Lumen Gentium, the chapter about the people of God. And after the council, of course, he tried to defend the council about some enemies, some disillusions, some questions, many questions. And he said, no, we have to leave this synodality in the church. It's not enough to make a beautiful text in the Vatican, but we have to leave this synodality. Well, he spoke more about conciliarity, but the main book about his new vision is Ministère et Communion Ecclésiale. We say in French, in English, Ministries and Ecclesial Communion. In this book in 1971, he explained that no, he does not want to use the distinction between structure and life, but he thinks that we must begin, if we speak of the church, of the community, the Christian community, and look at the community itself, structured, but the first focus must be on this community. And the ministries are at the service of this life. And the great word, of course, in this book is communion. In fact, we can say that in the theology of Congar, the word synod is not very often used, but communion and conciliarity. And he said that this conciliarity is a spirit and also an institution. And he said that the two things are important: spirit and institution. We can say of synodality, it's the same. There is no synodality without a spirit, and there is no synodality without institutions. The spirit, because the spirit is that we all share, and we are receptive to the others. We hear the others, and we cannot live in the church without the others, because we are not alone. Wearing all the tradition we share, and the institution, because I'm sorry, because Congar was seeing that during the council, there was a need to make new institutions. And he said, if I had time, I would study canon law, and I would learn about institutions, the institutions to make in application the idea of synodality. It's the same in, I would say, as an example, in a parish, I am a parish priest, in a parish, synodality must be a spirit. People share the same objectives, the same faith, the same desire to welcome people, but we need also institutions. We have councils, we have small teams which try to do it, to share and to make decisions. So in the work of Congar, you say that we have to develop these two aspects, and I think it's the big question of synodality is how to correlate the two aspects, spirit and institutions, new institutions, to be able to live really this synodality. Well, so I think I must let you react about this big panorama about Congar.
Thanks, Eric. So we'll hand over to Rosa and Valerie, who are going to help moderate and ask the question.
Thanks, Robert, and thank you, Eric. We've got a few questions coming in here on the chat, and I think we'd love to stimulate some more questions, which obviously the discussion will do. One of the first questions, and actually this is a theme that won't be unfamiliar to you, and we're probably seeing again with the synodal process from Francis. Why do you think there's been so much resistance to Vatican II? And do you think Congar anticipated this happening?
Congar, in fact, was aware of the difficulties in the 50s. In the 50s, there were many difficulties in the unity of the church in France, because there were integrist currents, integrist groups, which resist and wanted to keep the church as it was and no change. A pyramidal structure all descends from up from the top to the people, and there is just one sense of descending and no sense of sharing. And so I think it's always more comfortable for some people to say, I don't decide, I don't take part, I just follow. And it's a kind of idolatry sometimes for the bishops, for the priests, for the Pope. Maybe there is a kind of idolatry which is dangerous, because we must respect the function, we must respect the mission, and also we must say no where we don't agree. And this is a kind of balance. Congar was speaking with everybody during the council, and wanted to to share with all the tendencies, and saying that we can give something, but we must be ready to receive.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, Eric. We have a question here from Chris, and he says, I'd love to hear a little about Congar's theological relationship with Marie-Dominique Chenu, and if you would think that they would receive Francis's vision of synodality in the same way.
Yes, well, with Chenu, I think Chenu played a great role in the life of Congar, mainly at the beginning, because he opened the way for the research in the history, and Chenu was opening many new streets in the research. For instance, he had the idea of a Center for Islamo-Christian Research Contacts, an institute which is still living in Le Caire in Egypt, IDEO, Institute of Études Orientales. So he was also a precursor. Chenu was a bit older, and there was a kind of fraternity between them. Chenu was maybe more invested in some pastoral places. He was very near from some worker priests, some groups of Catholic Action, and Congar. He wanted to give his time to the research. He was not far from people in his heart, but he wanted to do his to write. His great idea was to write a treatise, a big book about the church. He couldn't do it, but he made just some little bricks, some little milestones to do it, because every time his idea of the church was changing. So Chenu was very important in the council because of his idea of the science of the time, and that also Congar shared, but not so much. He was more a dogmatician, and but there was a great proximity of friendship, not always in the work, in the concrete work.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Another question in here from Jerry, and again, it kind of connects with the synodal process that we're having at the moment. Do you think the fear of schism is a bit of a red herring, which can be used to effectively block conversation around reform and maybe create a bit of fear? As Jerry says, to make an omelette, you need to crack eggs.
Can you repeat? I did not.
Okay, sorry, I'll do it again.
Yes.
It's just in this process, do you think is the fear of schism within the church? Schism.
What is
separation, a break? You know, I think the German church, there's been a bit of the synod that there's a breakaway. Do you think that's a bit of a red herring, a bit of a guise, which can be used to block conversation around reform? Do you think it's used to scare people?
I don't really understand your question. Could you say with other words? Because
I think what we're trying to get at is that sometimes when there is criticism or challenge in the notion of reform of the church, sometimes what can be said by the institutional church is that you want to break away. That there wants to be a new church, and actually that's not what people are talking about. They want reform within. And I think the question is, do you think that is used to stop discussion?
I think the discussion is continuing now, because we see even for the German Catholic Church, there is a process of discussion between Rome and the bishops. I say it's inevitable to have these tensions. The tensions are part of the life. And also there is I think I saw a proximity between Pope Francis and Congar in this idea that the tensions are normal, but we have to go to dépasser, we say in French, dépasser, to go up and to go in a new situation where the tensions are accepted but are surmontés, dépassés. We try to think differently, and it's a work. It's a big work. So the tensions are normal. There is some people more conservative, some people more progressive. It's normal. There are sometimes very bad feelings, of course, that is not good, but there is, of course, the same love of the church.
Yes.
And there is a misunderstanding, and people have to be able to hear the other. It's an important idea with Congar, the idea of hearing And he said, at the council, we have heard the other churches. At the Council of Trent, we just said, no, we cannot accept the Protestant reform. We say no, and it was maybe it was normal to say that we don't have the same idea of the church, but we didn't hear the reason of Protestantism, and we didn't hear the real desire of the people to share the gospel, to hear the gospel in their own languages.
Yeah. Thanks, Eric. Thank you.
We have another question here. I think people in our generation welcomed the reforms of Vatican II. However, as Anne asks, many young people, and she talks about in Scotland, are looking back to a church of the past, a fortress church, with the support of some of the young priests. Our young priests in Scotland, England, or Wales, a lot of them are very conservative. Is that happening in France, and how is it being dealt with?
Yes, we have to analyze this, and maybe we have to go forward and not just to see some more disturbing facts, because these facts are a bit disturbing, but we have to try to understand even these people, young people. And it's not easy. In my parish also, I saw, of course, this desire to go back to a period before Vatican II, and I try to understand. And of course, I have also to explain. I think it's a big work to give a good formation, a good training to the young people and to the priest, because the question is always, where did you follow your training, and
Yeah.
did you enjoy your training? But we are not in the same world as the Vatican II Council. It's a different world, and the people are young people sometimes suffering from the difficulty to live their faith, because they are just a minority, and it is a sense which didn't existed 50 years ago. As well, I can say that when I was young, I was also a minority, even at this time. But now we see really a society which is quite different in its values, and of course there is the reflex of conservatism, of going back. Yes, it exists, and I try to fight in a way, explaining the gospel, of course, in the mass, going back to the words of Christ. I came to save. I came to love. I didn't come to fight against this or this, because it has no well, this is not the vocation of the church. Well, that I would say all is not negative, because the young people are wanting to live inside the church. They are relying on their priests. So I think the young people are they wait a lot from the priests, and we don't have to shock them, but to explain quietly, to explain, as Congar did in his own time, because in the time of Congar also there are some resistance against the ideas of Congar, but the truth is always a light for people. So in my parish, I speak about Vatican II. I try to explain the main themes of Vatican II, and also I see that the young people are also sensible to the misery of people. They go in the streets. They help poor people. They are not so closed. They seem to be closed, but we have to see also the openness, in a sense. I don't see if I can answer, because it's a difficult question. It's a way of tensions, of course, because we have to balance. The fidelity is not mechanical, as said Congar. Fidelity is must be a deep fidelity to the truth of the gospel. Is not to repeat our grandmother. That is true, yes. Yes, but also sometimes we have to understand this desire of prayer, of spirituality, and this is important for them.
Thank you, Eric.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. There's a question kind of connected to this part of the discussion from Gemma, who's saying she's beginning to understand a bit better Pope Francis' thinking around the synodal process and his encouragement to change our pastoral approach, our pastoral ministries, but at the same time not wanting to change doctrine and church teachings. And she's asking, do you think this is possible? Do you think they need to reflect one another? Or is that another tension?
You want to know if there is a need to change the doctrine? Is it a need to change the doctrine? Is it your question or not?
Yeah, I think, she's probably talking about some of them, maybe the church teachings that we have and a pastoral approach. Do you think there's conflict?
Oh, yes. Well, during the council, during Vatican II, there was a big discussion at the first session about pastoral doctrinal aspects, and there is no opposition, and because in fact the doctrine is made to serve the pastoral mission of the church. So I don't see any opposition. I think the doctrine, what we call the doctrine, may change, because maybe enriched, maybe we have to know better our tradition, to know and to see that we have to go forward on some problems, and we must distinguish between doctrine and I would say the dogmas of the faith. And Christ is our Savior, the Trinity, the sacraments. There are points which are definitely fixed by the Church in the past, and which are our treasury. But there are some new problems, and I think that the Church has to answer to these new problems. I think the Pope made some steps in the questions of the families, and we can say it's not doctrinal. Yes, it is also doctrinal, because doctrine is not separated from pastoral aspects. So the Pope used to speak about exhortation. It's an exhortation on the family, but it's also a doctrinal aspect in this exhortation.
That's really helpful, Eric. Thank you. It's very helpful.
We've got a question here from Carol that's quite close to my heart as well. The common priesthood of the people seems to be seen as a Protestant trait. Why is it that the belief in the common priesthood is not really visible in the Catholic Church? It's articulated in the baptism ceremony, but it does not seem to be given any real credence. Do you have some thoughts on that, Eric?
Yes, well, I think this question of common priesthood was studied by Congar, and in fact, the old habits came back in the church, because we say priesthood is for the clergy, and in fact, it's very difficult to to get the council teaching going inside all the church. It's a big work, because I see in my own experience that many people, they say, oh yes, I agree with Vatican II, but in fact they do otherwise. They do as before, because they are the clientele. They don't understand well. So in fact, I think it's normal, because it's difficult to change after 4 centuries of Council of Trent and the habits inside the people. And so the culture is slowly changing, but it's a long time. And sometimes it's only touching some well-trained people, but not all the people. So in fact, also it's a question of vocabulary. But I think that the synodal process can help us to better see the priest inside the community, and not up on the not dominating, but serving. Of course, he has a responsibility, and the bishop also. But Congar wanted to place bishops and priests inside the church as partners, and not just with subordinates. So he wanted this communion also important, as this exchange between the people and the priests. So I think it will take some more time, but we see that in the church, in fact, these tensions are not finished. The backward movement is not so successful, I think. It's not, the real question is to be a missionaries for the Pope, and the tensions inside the church must not be too, I think maybe the main answer to give to this tendency of conservatism is to say, we have to be missionaries too, all. And how do we succeed to be missionaries in this time? So, and the other questions are secondary, because the mission of the church is to spread the gospel and to share the gospel. And so how do we live to show this face of the church? This is the same question that Congar answered in 1935, the unbelief. Why the unbelief? Can the church change to be welcoming to the people? So.
Thank you very much indeed. Eric?
Yeah, there's a couple of final questions coming in, and both of them are really important, so I hope we can cover them in the time. It's back to young people again, and the kind of conservatism we are seeing, although I think it's in a small group. Do you think that young people are looking for security? They're kind of looking backwards? And with so much trouble in the world and the interruption of normal life due to COVID, do you think there could be an increasing fear of change, and that people want to resort back to a security?
What I saw after the COVID is I am in a town. In the center of my town, we have many young people in the church, and I think it's true in big cities. Also, I see some young people wanted to be baptized, to be confirmed. I think there are signs that this research is really in the young people, and. Well, the question of change is not their question, the first question. The young people, they just want to know what is it to be a Christian? What is it to be a Catholic? And they just want to know very basic things. And I think our questions about change, reform, they are not against, but they are just trying to find the foundations of their own faith. So I can understand. Well, now we have also to imply young people in the church, in the reflection. So it takes time. But I see when you are 25, you just, well, it's a long process to be independent, to have a work, to have a family. So the faith is a place of stability for them, and not for, we say conservatives, well, but it's also a place to have an anchor to live, and to also to live in this world. So we have to understand, and we have to speak. I think it's more difficult to speak because in the families also, I see it's not always very easy to speak. My niece is in a process of divorce, and she told me, I cannot enter in a church. Well, we have to hear also the cries, the shouting of the people, and I think the word is to accompany, to walk with the people, to try to learn from the signs of the times, which are different in this time.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you. Might move to the last question. Do you think, Valerie?
I think we're going on. Let's leave it with that one. It's been so rich, wonderful.
Thank you.
We have one more that I would quite like to bring up. Sorry,
Yeah.
I've just seen it pop up here. I've just seen it pop up, so I'm going to ask. Do you think in France, as in the rest of the world, that the various abuse scandals and the institutional response has impacted on the credibility of the church?
I don't know exactly. It's difficult to know. As for me, I am a bit how to say, en colère would say in English. I am a bit anger, a sort of anger, because I see all these scandals, because it's so difficult to live with this. And in France, we have also scandals with bishops, and this kind of secrecy about the abuse, and all this is. I am in a state of anger, but in a sense, I also live in peace. So it's difficult to say. But as for the people, it's difficult to know exactly. I think well, the people who are engaged in the church, committed in the church, they don't bear this atmosphere. They want to have a more transparency, more clarity, more to be associated also to the decisions. Well, this time we cannot more accept this governance by secrecy, and everything is hidden, and you cannot have your word, and it's impossible in this world. I think the actual world answers us to go back to our own tradition, because our own tradition, says Congar, is not a sort of monarchical power, but in the Middle Age and also in the first centuries, all the people takes part in the life of the church. For instance, Congar said the bishops were chosen also with the consent of the people. They were associated to the choice of the bishops, and they can give their word. They are consulted. So we have to go back to this old but good tradition, and to give back to the people confidence in the church. So I think that there is, of course, people come to ask for a sacrament, for a punctual thing, but well, we have to show that we are a good house where everybody can be safe. But it's difficult, but we must do it for the people.
It's about restoring the anchors, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Eric. I think we'll hand over now to, I'm not sure who I'm handing over to, but Robert, you'll know. Gemma, is it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
I
we're going to
hope
hand
you will.
over to, yeah, thanks, Rosa. Thanks, Valerie. We're going to hand over to Gemma now to offer just some words of thanks to Eric for tonight.
Thank you. I hope you will read Yves Congar. You can read Yves Congar.
I think again we'll circulate just the titles and where people can access the book as well after the session.
Yes, he has a lot to say. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you and your network.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Eric, I would just like to say a special thank you. You've really given us an amazing picture of just how much Congar's work influenced Vatican II, and have given us a deeper understanding also of Vatican II. It's been amazing. Your statement, no synodality without spirit and no synodality without institution. Personally, that has really challenged my temptation to try and live out my Catholic faith without the institution. I'm going to have a wee rethink there. But we'd also like to finish by saying a wee prayer for you, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Loving God, we thank you for the wisdom and insight of Eric. We thank you for what he has shared with us tonight. We ask that you anoint him anew such that his ministry may continue to be empowered by your Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, and long life to Scotland.
Thank you.
Benediction for Scotland.
As we close, just a quick kind of reminder to people about our Advent journey for 2022. Starts next week when we welcome as our companion Alistair Dutton, the Chief Executive of SCIAF. We look forward to seeing you all then. To those who are leaving the meeting at this point, good night, God bless, and we invite you to log off. For those who wish to stay and join a breakout room, please stay connected. And in a few minutes, we will generate the breakout rooms. Thank you again.